Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Deckbuilding Derezzed. I'm Code Marvelous and today I'm joined by SlySquid.
Hello.
And today we're going to be discussing the update to SlySquid's motherfucking Maxx deck with card updates from the SanSan cycle. So I wanted to have Chase on to talk about this deck because the advent of a couple of things that have happened in the SanSan cycle have kind of reinvigorated Maxx. She never really went away, but she's becoming more popular again, I would say, due to some card additions that are going to come up in the SanSan, well, came up in the SanSan cycle and are certainly going to come up in Mumbad. So I wanted to go over what Sly really has been working on for basically since Order and Chaos was spoiled.
Yeah.
So do you want to tell us a little bit about why you've really been playing this deck so long, why you think it's got a lot of strength?
This deck, to me, I've been playing it so long because it doesn't play like what I consider to be standard Netrunner, which is just like high economy, high very good breakers. I don't know, I feel like it's such a pinpoint into the word I'm looking for. Efficiency. You know what I mean? I feel like that's what everybody goes for. Whereas I am kind of hey, it'd be fun to do this turn. It'd be fun to do this turn. It's kind of like a deck for kids with ADD. So
right.
This deck just focuses on exploiting your weakest server and just going to town on that until you protect it. And then it moves to the next one, and it moves to the next one, all the while you're probably not able to score agendas, and then the coup de grace is just wantoning destructioning your hand out of into the heap, and then just running that and basically winning.
Just and I think that's definitely true.
Happening, yeah.
If you look at, I was actually having a discussion with a couple of different people today about, we're all making this foray into Haley. And then the discussion comes back to, well, isn't prepaid Kate just more efficient than whatever we're making? And it's the same discussions we had about Andy 2 years ago.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Efficiency is great, and especially if you're looking about going to a tournament like Worlds, you know what I mean? It's not only the efficiency that you're looking for, but it's consistency, right? This deck has a lot of 2-ofs. Sure, you burn through it really fast, but it's not it's probably the most consistent Anarch deck, I'd say. Maybe not right now, but definitely when I made the first version of this, it was as consistent as you can get, right? Because she pitches the cards, so basically first turn it's you're seeing 8 cards, and you have all those options and a bunch of tools at your disposal. But maybe now it's not so.
I would say it's still very consistent because it works off of the Anarch principle of using your heap as an extension of your hand.
Yes, that's exactly right. Yeah.
So let's go through and let's talk about some of the cards, why they're in there, why some of them have changed. We'll just go right down the line and we'll discuss your card choices.
Cool.
So let's talk about Account Siphon in this deck. You only have it as a 2-of in this version.
Yeah, I mean the Levy AR takes up a lot of influence. If it wasn't for that, then I'd probably try to fit 3. Account Siphon is probably the bread and butter of this deck. It's meant to basically stop the Corp game and stop them from being able to even start to score. Or if they want to start scoring, they're going to leave themselves vulnerable, to be keyholed or whatever. So Account Siphon is the first step to oh my god, I have to protect my HQ or I'm going to be broke all game. You know what I mean? So right off the bat, this deck has a lot of notoriety. People know they're going to get Account Siphon, so they have to spend resources to try to stop that. That's the main thing.
Right, and it plays into the game plan of this deck, which is threatening all servers simultaneously to spread ice and resources incredibly thin for the Corp.
That's exactly right. Yeah, you want everything to be super thin, because if they're gonna put 3 ice on HQ to stop you from Account Siphoning, chances are they're either not scoring or they're not protecting themselves from Keyhole. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. So let's talk about the 2 amped up. A lot of different Maxx builds. Some of them have it. Some people say that this card is great. Some people say that this card is really not great.
You know, I dropped Amped Up for a while. I don't post every version of this deck because I only post it when I get like a very final version. But there was, before DDoS, I actually took out Amped Up, and it wasn't until I put DDoS in that I was like, oh my god, I need Amped Up again, because it opens up so many turns where it's just like, if I had Amped Up, I could Keyhole 7 times. You know what I mean?
And to kind of explain that interaction, DDoS says that the corp cannot res the outermost piece of ice during a run on any server this turn. So Amped Up makes it so that you get more value out of that card by giving you more clicks to run with, whereas Amped Up by itself without DDoS, you still need whatever money you're going to need with Eater, or however many cards you're going to need to break with Faust. But Amped Up interacts with DDoS and makes it so that you can get that max value out of DDoS without having to spend money.
Max value, I like that.
Yeah, max value. Come on, man.
Pun intended, I guess.
Yeah, get on the pun train. Let's go. Obviously, we've got 3 day jobs just because, as far as Anarch economy that doesn't punish the crap out of you, day job is just a great card.
I've always loved what I refer to as like full turn burst economy. I did it back when I was playing my like Rena deck that I've never published, that didn't really win a lot, but I had a lot of fun with before Maxx came out. And it used liberated accounts, and it used what was the first like pay a click, gain $2 neutral? Can't even remember the name now. It was a job. You remember?
Armitage code busting.
Armitage code busting. Yeah,
Come on, Chase.
Yeah, especially in a pawn shop deck. Like, I just love that. It's like, because especially with the decks that I build that are like full denial, not just economy, but like card denial. I find that there's turns that you just like, either the corp doesn't give you a good target, or there's just like nothing advantageous for you to do. So it's like, fuck it, I'm going to spend my whole turn boosting up. You know what I mean? So it's like you almost force the corp to like give you a target, or you're going to end up with an insane amount of credits, right? And day job is just like literally the best version of that. Like, I love liberated accounts, but day job is just better. Like, it's better.
3 Déjà Vus. It shouldn't be surprising for any Anarch player that Déjà Vus are in here, but tell me, a little bit about what are some of the key targets that you're using Déjà Vu for.
I mean, obviously the key target, like Levy, is like a huge target for this card. This deck is a 47 card build, which means that you have 14 turns before you mill yourself. So Levy is kind of a necessity. And I would say basically just whatever you need at the time. Like, Account Siphon is obviously huge, but I mean, if you don't have an Eater, like, get an Eater. If you don't have a Keyhole, get a Keyhole. Like, I would say Eater, Keyhole, Faust. I love setting up Wanton Destruction. So if I want to kind of like stop the game in its tracks like really fast, I'll just Déjà Vu a Wanton Destruction back in my hand. And it's just a clear sign going, if you don't do something, you're going to get fucked. You know what I mean?
Absolutely.
And it's just like, I don't know, I love things like that.
And while we're on the subject of screwing the crap out of the corp, let's talk about Hacktivist Meeting.
Oh, Hacktivist Meeting is just like, I mean, obviously I can't run every remote. Like, I'm not going to hide it. My breaker suite is not like a super efficient breaker suite. Right. I can get in when I need to get in. It just takes some work, right? So being able to have Hacktivist Meeting it's just dirty. Especially like, it doesn't happen all the time, but I mean, after a Wanton Destruction, if I hit your hand to 0, and then people forget that they can't res Jackson Howard, like, that makes me so happy. Like, I mean, I feel like a total dick, but it makes me incredibly happy.
Right. And it's important to say, that it doesn't say when you res a non-ice card, trash a card randomly. It says as an additional cost. So since it's an additional cost, if you have no cards, you cannot res anything.
Yeah.
Which is neat. So we've got 3 of I've had worse, which I imagine is for accelerating the deck and preventing you from getting blown up.
Yeah, more often than not, it's for prevention. It's good for accelerating, but it's for prevention. Yeah.
Okay. And we've also got Levy AR, which we've already discussed. When you're playing Maxx, you gotta eventually reset, and that's actually a big part of your power tempo, because by the time you're completely milled, you've done a lot of damage to the corp, and they're just, starting to limp, and then you just reset the clock.
And it should be noted too that this deck relies on burst economy. So like, there's a lot of decks now that are taking out the levies, but this doesn't have. It's not like Regas Maxx where it has sustainable economy. This is like, you very much need to draw in your economy. If you're not getting cards, then your tempo is going to die like super fast.
Right. So we also have 2 Retrieval Runs, which is the 3-cost Anarch event that you run archives, and instead of accessing, you can install a program, so it synergizes with Eater.
Yeah, and Femme.
Femme.
Retrieval Run is just like, basically this is the card that lets me go, basically protect archives, where I'm going to get whatever program I want at any time. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, you put a toll booth on HQ? Well, your archives is open, so I'm going to get a Femme and just jump over it the whole time. Like, it's just like, it's like after, it helps accelerate the early game, which is flawless, and then after the early game has happened and everybody's got like 2 or 3 ice on R&D, 2 or 3 ice on HQ, you're just like, all right, well, I guess I'm bringing back some Femmes, and that ice is irrelevant now.
Right. We have Sure Gamble, once again, feeds into Burst Econ. Most runner decks are running Sure Gamble these days, and you have 2 Wanton Destructions.
This card is the pinnacle of the deck. Like, when people see this deck, I hate the term Keyhole, like Eater Keyhole deck. I get that I Eater and I Keyhole, but this is very much a Wanton Destruction deck. It's all about denial. Like, it's about slowing the corp down to a crawl and then using Wanton Destruction to just burn their hand out.
Right. When it's chock full of nuts and full
of...
Yeah,
like obviously after, 14 turns of them doing literally nothing, there's going to be agendas. Like, just somewhere. A general rule of thumb is for every 5 cards they draw, there's an agenda. You know what I mean? So you just kind of just wait around and just go, oh, you haven't scored in a couple turns, let's one. Or if you... Wanton's another good, like, anti-kill card, you know what I mean? If you think they're playing Scorched Earth or whatever, or you think they're holding on to combo cards, you're just like, yeah, fuck it.
Right. I mean, and when I play this style of deck, that's what I usually try to do when I'm up against what I perceive to be a meat damage deck, is I will wait until they've done I'm going to Jackson overdraw. All right, I'm pitching these, and I'm keeping these. I'm like, cool, so I'm going to just go ahead and pick that C-Source and those Scorches out of your hand now.
Yeah. They don't have to worry about C-Sourcing me, but the Scorches for sure. Those are the little bastards.
Those are problematic. So one of the relatively newer additions compared to your original version is the introduction of DDoS.
This card is everything everybody said about it. It's amazing. It's just like it. I mean, for this deck especially, because, like, again, I don't have a full breaker suite, like, so it helps me get in when people are like, oh, he's got Eater and he's already got his Femme out. He's probably not going to be able to get this thing that I'm going to try to advance behind nothing, right? DDoS just lets me in there. It's also another avenue in order to get into archives. Like, those are probably the worst uses of DDoS. The best uses of DDoS are just fully fucking exploiting Account Siphon first turn or late game Keyhole. Like, basically, DDoS is the best early game card probably in this deck. It's just amazing. If I see DDoS and Account Siphon, like, your game is fucked. It's such an uphill battle after that.
Right. So we have a One of Hades shard, which synergizes well with Eater and the the Keyhole strategy, because once again, in the late game, depending on what you've drawn, what's been tossed in the bin, and what you've had to retrieval run, you might not have the ability to get a normal access on archives.
Yes. It's just like it's a means to the end. It's not like, and generally you don't even need to play the card. I'd say it's probably like 25% of the games that you need Hades Shard to win. Before it was way more prevalent before Faust, but like basically like the first version of this deck you couldn't win without Hades Shard. But now that Faust is out, it's kind of like it's whatever. I mean, it's a one-of, so you don't really
Right, but it's still good to have, and it helps you close games.
for sure.
We've got Joshua B. I know a lot of people's builds that aren't running DLR. A lot of the Maxx builds have dropped Joshua B.
There's it's like this is the card that people are like, it's black and white. You know what I mean? You have to be on one side of this fucking fence. It's either you're completely for it and you see how powerful it is, or you're completely against it and you're never going to use it. Joshua B is like my favorite card. Like, I love it. It's like exactly what I want an Anarch card to be. It's so cheap to put down. It's like, especially in a denial deck, it's like, sure, like, do you have the time to spend, you know, wasting a click and 2 credits to get rid of this guy who just basically is so easy for me to play? You know what I mean? It's like, you don't. Like, I know it's hard to say it without being like conceited, but I mean, the deck works and it keeps you broke and it keeps you at a sense that like you could barely do what you want to do, and that's score agendas. So for you to take the time to actually get rid of Josh, just to know that I'm probably going to play another one, is just debilitating. Like, it's so hard to manage.
Right. I agree. So we've also got a 3x of liberated accounts. Not a huge amount of exploration needed there. You know, it's great burst econ. It's one of those things, as we've discussed before, you can leave it with 4 credits on it, knowing it will never get trashed because it's not a good value exchange.
Yeah, and that's like, and for anybody who doesn't know, like, this deck is very susceptible to close accounts. One of my favorite plays is to just literally leave every one of my liberated accounts with 4 credits on it. So it's like, sure, you might be at like 2 or 3 credits and try to reset the game by closed accounting me, but now you have to spend, you know, a bunch of clicks and a bunch of credits to try to prevent me from being able to get back up really fast, right? And it's just like, I don't know, it's just a flawless card. And it falls in with my love for just full turn bursts. Like, I don't have anything to do this turn, so I'll gain 6.
We've got 3 of same old thing. There's a lot of really high value events in this game that we can get a lot of value of with this card. You know, recurring account siphons, recurring the levy if you lose it, retrieval run, whatever you need really, except for day job. So, as far as a breaker suite is concerned, we have 3 eater, which is where you access 0 cards, so it synergizes with things like Keyhole and Account Siphon, which are kind of and Wanton, which are the kind of the cornerstones of this deck.
Also, Retrieval Run and
yeah, basically all the run events of this deck don't require accesses, so they synergize very well with Eater. We've got 2 of Faust, which I think is really the card from the SanSan cycle that gave Anarchs a lot of wings and gave them a lot of staying power in the mid to late game, because your duplicates or whatever you don't need right now can be fuel to get into that remote, which is what Eater made Anarch weak against.
Yeah, and I would say Faust for this deck is not like, it's not like an auto play. It's not like you're not drawing all of your breakers and playing it like a regular deck. Obviously, you guys have figured out that I don't have the memory to sustain all of my programs or one of each of my programs. So Faust is kind of like, use it when you need it. If they're going to rush, if that's their strategy, then you need to stop that. You know what I mean? So Faust really helps you.
Right, it gives you the means to stop the rush.
Yeah.
Femme Fatale, we kind of already discussed. I'm assuming you're hardly ever hard installing these.
Yeah, hardly ever. I mean, early game, yeah. I'm trying to retrieval run it as best as possible. If I can overdraw and pitch it, I will. Um, it not a ton of people play Femme in their max decks, but I've always loved Femme. Like even back, anybody who watched me from Bad Publicity, they know that Femme's probably one of my favorite breakers. And it just does exactly what I need it to do. It helps me exploit, one server. It also is swordsman protection because a lot more people are playing swordsman because a lot more people are playing Eater and
Faust.
Yeah, Eater and Faust, and people are like, swordsman will do it, and I'm like, it does nothing. I want the Femme out anyway. You know what I mean?
Right.
So.
And it just turns those high value ice that we're seeing now, like the Gutenbergs, right?
Yeah.
The Archangels, the Tollbooths of the world. Basically, all of these really high strength pieces of yellow ice that have come out recently. Femme just says, "Now we're done."
Yeah, and Turing is another big pain in the ass for this kind of deck.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so we've got 2 keyholes, which we've already discussed, synergizes well with Eater.
Yeah.
One question that I have, and one of the things that I think is hardest for a new pilot of this type of deck to understand, so I want you to maybe elaborate on your experience a little bit. When do you kind of flip the switch on this and really start dedicating lots of turns to keyholing?
Okay, so that's one thing I want to scratch right there is like, this is not a keyhole deck. Like, it's not. If you want to play a keyhole deck, get an efficient breaker suite, make more money, probably use, Katie Jones. This is just like, if they're not going to protect R&D, this is your way to exploit R&D. You know what I mean?
Okay.
Again, you win from Wanton Destruction. You don't win from Keyhole. There's a lot of games that you'll win because of Keyhole, but it's not my main strategy. There's some games where, against like PE, where it's basically the only card you'll need. And then there's other games where, if I can pull one Keyhole off in order to scare you to install 2 ice on top of R&D, like, that's exactly why I have it in there. Basically, right. Waste your resources to protect from being keyholed. If there's ever an open window, like if you see, the vein pulsing, take the bite and, play DDoS, play fucking amped up, and go to town and keyhole the shit out of them. But, a lot of people know what this deck does, and they're like, well, I'm not going to get keyholed 30 times. And it's like, okay, well, then you're going to get Account Siphon 15. There's damned if you do, you damned if you don't. You want to make sure that you do it enough so they protect against it and spend the resources and slow the game down, because the crescendo is Wanton Destruction.
Right. Okay.
All roads lead back to Wanton Destruction.
So, okay, here's something that not everybody includes. So we have the final 2 cards are 2 tropes. I'm kind of curious to see what the thought process is here, considering you are also running a copy of Levy AR.
So, I want to say it right now, I actually don't like Trope. I like the idea of it. I liked, the idea of like, oh yeah, more recursion. The deck doesn't need it. This is kind of a placeholder right now because basically I don't build. Dan, you could attest to this. I don't ever build new decks. All I do is modify.
No, you don't ever.
Like, I've literally played this deck, and it's not a joke. I've played this deck since like a month before Order and Chaos came out. I was playtesting it, proxying it, and everything. And I play my SlySquid deck all the time. I don't ever play any decks. I just modify those, playtest with, like I'm playtesting right now with Mumbad.
So if these are a placeholder, what goes in their place?
Well, the first card that's going in is Making an Entrance. Anybody who doesn't know it,
can you go over what that card does?
Yeah, so it's a 0-cost event. It's a priority, so you have to play it as your first click. And it says, look at the top 6 cards of your deck. You can trash any one of those cards and then put them back in any order. So for a deck like this, that's fucking nuts. Like, it's literally everything you want to do. It basically gives you Maxx's ability in one card. It's like, you'll see a hand and you'll be like, oh, I got an Account Siphon. It'd be really cool if I got a DDoS. And then you're like, okay, well, let's look at fucking 6 cards. So anybody doing the math at home, you get to see 5 cards from your opening hand, 2 cards that you trash, and then 1 card from your Maxx. Now, you get to see an additional 6 cards. Now, you don't even have to like trash all of them. Yeah, sure, you could trash, like the Femmes or whatever, but because you're playing Maxx, you can, instead of trashing them, you can sort them in the order that you're going to self-trash them and draw them in the order that you want. Or, be like, oh, I see a DDoS there, or an Account Siphon, or an Eater, or whatever you need to do to start the Account Siphon train. You just put it on the top and draw it and play it in Account Siphon. Or Keyhole, whatever first turn huge exploiting card you need.
Right. And to put that in perspective for people, to basically think about it, like, let's say you've drawn the 6 and you see the Account Siphon and the DDoS and a couple programs that you don't need right now, right? Yeah. You can make the things you don't need the first 2 cards that you'll flip at the start of your next turn. Yep. Make the Account Siphon the 3rd card, make the DDoS the 4th card, and then you've literally set up a guaranteed Account Siphon turn, and your opponent has no idea what you've done or what you've set up, but only that the one disadvantage of Maxx has been kind of mitigated.
Yeah, and it's not even like really a disadvantage. It's less like, I mean, that's just the cool side effect. It's a
variance. It's not a downside.
The main thing is like getting the combo piece that you need to exploit the server that you need to exploit. You know what I mean? It's like, yeah, if you're gonna play like a fast advanced deck, you need to start Account Siphoning. Like, you just need to do it. So you need to set up really fast, and being able to see what is that? It's friggin' 8.
It's 14 cards.
14 cards your first turn. Like, that's just, how do you not Account Siphon them? It's ridiculous.
Right.
For almost all of my test hands, I get it. So yeah, that's one card. It's pretty easy to see why it's a good card. It creates consistency. It's a perfect Anarch style card because
it's a great card for noise too.
Oh, it's a flawless card. It honestly, when I read it the first time, I was like, oh yeah, that's kind of cool. And then Glitch, I wanted to play some Netrunner, and I invited Glitch over, and I was like, I'm just gonna proxy, you know what I mean? And then I reread that card, and I was like, my God, this is gonna make my deck just so much more consistent, and it definitely does. It's just ridiculous, and it's perfect for late game because you're like, I mean, obviously it's for early game. This whole deck rocks early game. You want a good early game, but it's one of those few cards in this deck that, like Hacktivist Meeting, not really the best late game card. Day Job, yeah, not really great. But like this card, you get it and you're like, yeah, fucking, I'd love to see the next 6 cards that I'm gonna draw. You know what I mean? It's right. Just like, maybe there's an Account Siphon in there, or sometimes you're really scared, with your last 6 cards that you're going to mill your recursion and you're not going to get your Levy back, you know what I mean? And that's what I really wanted Trope for, because I was like, well, I really need Levy, and making an entrance just brings that consistency in where I almost can guarantee that I'm going to either get Levy or a recursion card when I need it.
That's true. The other thing that I would like to bring up about this deck is you're talking about how you're kind of waiting on cards. The current version of the deck is only rocking 14 out of 15 influence. What do you think is maybe going to occupy that 15th influence slot?
I don't even know yet. Like, I really don't know. That doesn't bother me. I used to run Box E because in my mind and a lot of people's minds, 2 hand sizes is going to help you from dying. That was my original thought. But it actually doesn't. If you do the math, 5 cards is actually better with I've Had Worse if you're going to be scorched. Because if you have 5 cards and 1 I've Had Worse, it's a lower chance that they're not going to draw. It's a 1 in 5 chance that they're not going to hit your I've Had Worse and be able to kill you. Whereas like it's a 1 in 7 chance that they're gonna, or what I'm probably saying the math wrong.
Right. The point is the larger your hand size is, the more likely they are to miss I've had worse and you die.
So yeah, if you have 7 cards in your hand and they miss the I've had worse, you still die from two filters. So and it's just like it's costs 4 and it's fucking expensive. I think if anybody wanted to put a card in, if you wanted to like say for instance you really didn't like Hacktivist Meeting or like Trope isn't doing it for you. Anybody like that would be the first thing. Like Hacktivist Meeting, Trope, Faust, and Day Jobs are my flexible cards. You could probably remove one amped up right now. That's kind of the cards that I fluctuate and test with. So if you really wanted to spend the influence, which I don't think you need to do, probably Utopia Shard, and I'd probably cut a Trope.
Right.
But I don't think you need it. Like it does, you know what I mean? What I'd really like is 4 more influence for another Account Siphon. But
yeah, well, we don't live in a land with 18 influence runners yet.
No.
But yeah, so thank you very much for going over this list with me.
One card I want to talk about before we go is Run Amok. That's the card that I'm going to take Faust out for.
Okay, so let our viewers know what Run Amok does.
So Run Amok is a run event for 3. It says make a run. When the run ends, trash a piece of ice res during this run. So it's like a super dick version of Inside Job.
Well, it's a piece of universal cutlery.
Yeah, it's so good. It's like, especially in this deck where you don't have like an avenue to get into remotes really good. So it's like if they're trying to rush, Faust was my way to get like past rushing. So my main rig is 1 Eater, 1 Femme, and 1 Keyhole. That's my 4 memory. So if I wanted to Faust, I either had to get rid of my Eater or my Femme before. But with Run Amok, it's just like, oh, you're trying to fast advance? That's cute. First click, I'll run it. And it's like, if you res the ice, I can break it with Eater and not take any damage or do whatever, blah, blah, blah,
and then just go back in.
And then just go back in and steal it. And now, let's think about it with DDoS. Say, for instance, you're going to be smart and fucking put 2 ice over it. It's like, oh, you can't DDoS through this. It's like DDoS Run Amok. So now you can't res the first ice. You have to res the second ice, which I trash. And then DDoS lasts the whole turn. So then I can still run through. You need to have 3 ice like on your remote server to score an agenda.
Right, it really slows down the rush game.
I've never had a person be able to have 3 ice on a remote server. It's just, it doesn't exist. Like maybe with those high ice HB decks, but like for the majority of the part, people are playing NBN right now, and like a 3 ice is a luxury you don't have not to put on your central service with this deck. If you're putting 3 ice on your remotes, fucking score, because I'm gonna keyhole you 100 times. Like it's over.
Right.
Run Amok is so dirty.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really excited about a lot of the NR cards that are going to come in the Mumbad Cycle. I'm especially excited because, I'm making my own forays into Maxx now that me and Noise have temporarily broken up due to all the HB that I went up against at Worlds.
Yeah, I think it's time you take a little bit of break.
Yeah, well, that and Harpsichord makes life very hard for him.
Yeah.
Though I was discussing with Pacer online that one of the things is he took out a clone ship and slotted into employee strikes into Noise, and then just turns Noise back on against everybody.
That's awesome. That's a good idea.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this episode of Deckbuilding Derezzed. Please feel free to leave comments. I'm also going to post the deck list in the show notes. You can find us on Twitter and obviously on YouTube and also on Facebook. Subscribe and share, and we'll catch you all next time.
Goodbye.